and welcome everybody to Sonic Talk episode 450, which feels like some kind of milestone. I suppose it is. It's a prime, not a prime number, but it's got a 0 on the end, so it's some way that. This is the podcast that talks about music technology, music, social music, live engineering, recording, electronic music, synthesizers, all that kind of stuff. So please do stay tuned if that is the thing that you're interested in. In fact, we encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel because this is where this is going. This is also streaming live to YouTube and also via sonicstate.com/live at the same time. So please do stay tuned. There'll be about an hour and a half. We've got a competition coming up from our sponsors, iZotope, so that'll be about halfway through. So enjoy. Now, let me see. I'll switch my things on and we'll start to talk to our guests because we have panellists and available people here. So let's start with Mr. Mark Tinley. We haven't seen Mark Tinley for some time. How are you, Mark?
Hello.
Mark Tinley is now officially.
I'm still alive.
And you started a shop, didn't you, not that long ago? So how's that all been going?
I've started a shop in Glastonbury. Yeah, it's really interesting. In fact, I had this. It's a really good way of connecting with people, and it's a really weird thing for me because I'm not a connecting with people person, and then I've decided I ought to be. So I did it with Facebook for a while and got to connect with people with Facebook and Twitter and all those sorts of things. And then I thought, this is kind of a bit, third person. I should really speak to people face to face. So it's a really nice way for me to connect with people because I'm the man that's running the shop. So if I don't like them, I can say, "Can you please leave, sir?" Or that. But this young girl came in on Monday and she picked up this. I've got loads of local people that make instruments have turned up with instruments, and I've got them on sale in the shops. And she picked up this lute thing that doesn't really have a description because it's a sort of a cross between a lute and a classical guitar. So it's strung like a classical guitar. And she started playing. And I said to her, I bet, if you could imagine yourself sitting in the middle of a field surrounded by buttercups playing that. And I said, if a young man dressed in a sort of a Hessian thing like a knight came walking past, what's the first line you'd sing? And she just started singing, and she had the most amazing voice. And I was like, wow, okay.
How very Glastonbury.
She said it was very Glastonbury. And then she said, so what do you think? I've only been playing and singing for about a year. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. Can I have your number? So
some collaborations.
Well, hopefully. I mean, really, mind-blowingly sort of beautiful voice, no auto-tune required there and stuff. So I'm hoping that she'll get back in touch and we'll do something in the studio.
Excellent.
So there you go. And
glad to hear it. But how's business then? Are you selling stuff? Is it kind of paying its way? Are you having fun?
It's all a bit slow, actually, and that's because I think people are a bit confused about where Abbey Muse actually is on the high street. So people come in. One of our listeners came wandering in today, and he said, "Oh, I didn't realise any of this was here." And then he said, "Oh, I didn't realise you were here. I thought you were further up." So I don't know what I'm going to have to do. Some kind of campaign in the town.
Get your lad out on the high street with a sandwich board. That's the way to do it.
Yeah, exactly. Or send my son up and down. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And the main music shop, Glastonbury Music Shop, is closing down on July the 12th. So all the people that go there to buy strings and violin bows and things that I know nothing about, like clarinet reeds and all that sort of stuff, they're all potential customers, I guess.
Maybe you should buy
as long as they know I'm there. So.
Buy their stock and then get a poster in the window. That's what I would suggest.
Yeah, I think I need to send my son up and down.
Okay, fair enough. Well, Mark, thank you very much for joining us.
It's
sorry.
fun.
Excellent. I'm glad to hear that.
Great fun. It's really good fun.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. Well, let's move on to Mr. Richard Hilton, who's over there in stateside with the birds singing in. Is it New England or New York? Which would be? Is it on the cusp between?
This is New England.
There we go. Well, pleased to have you aboard. Rich, of course, plays keyboards with Chic and is in the studio with Nile Rodgers. Well, not at this very moment, unless, of course, you're multitasking, which indeed you may be, a man of your talents. How have you been?
I've been very well, thank you. Very well.
Good stuff.
Beautiful day. Birds are singing to us all now, not just to me, and it's great.
I can hear
great weather.
I can hear them. That sounds like it's actually really, really hot in here. I'm going to be hot by the end of this. I should have put the aircon on, but I wasn't ready for it. It's been so cool here in England. It's just impossible to to predict. But now I know we're here. So anyway, well, thanks for joining us, Rich. And also we have we're doubling up. In fact, doubled up. And Andy, I got your URL right. This is Andy Shillito and Dave Spears in Dave Spears' Synth Cave. Andy Shillito, of course, sound engineer, studio engineer, been on the road for years and got lots of great stories, or not, depending on how what the legal situation is and what he can say and can't say. And he's got a website, so things are looking up. AndyShillito.co.uk. How are you, Andy? You good?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, very good. Enjoying a bit of time off of the road, and getting used to
doing your own laundry.
Getting used to I do that. Getting used to only doing my own laundry, and not everybody else's. It's quite nice actually. It's been quite nice. Normally I get a bit jittery after a couple of weeks and I get a bit uncomfortable in civilian land. But I've made a concerted effort to integrate this time and I'm really quite enjoying it. It's quite nice. People are all right, really, aren't they?
Are there rehabilitation programs for travelling sound engineers and touring musicians to reintegrate into society? I think that'd be a good idea.
But I think there's a gap in the market. So
halfway house.
That's my next business project, I think.
The halfway house. What you call House of Music. The House of Blues. No, that's already taken. I don't know. I'm sure that our chat room, who would like to say welcome to, is that going to be the right button? It's been such a long time. Yes, there they are. Chat room, at least the chat room that on our live at sonicstate.com/live agree. And I can't see anybody in the YouTube chat room responding to that, even though I think it's a little bit ahead of what... Anyway, rambling on. Nice to have you, Andy. And also Mr. Dave Spears. Look, Andy, you probably can't see this on your video return, but I put a nice little fader icon underneath, which is actually under Dave, but it matches his shirt perfectly. It's almost as if it was planned.
It does, yeah.
Yeah. Almost as if it was planned. How are you, Dave? Dave Spears, g4software.com with no lower third because I didn't get it. I didn't know which side he'd be sat on. And Andy's got a website and you've had yours for years.
Good guess. Yeah, I'm okay, thank you. Yes.
How are the old ladies in the room there bearing up under the newfound English heat?
Well, I'll tell you. So I haven't been in here. There's been a lot of things going on, which I won't go into, but I haven't been in this room for a while. And on when was the mad day we had here? It was something like Saturday or might have been Friday. No, I think it was Saturday, wasn't it? And I had come in with a view to kind of getting back into work again and turn the computers on. I think on the Friday night, and then I'd gone and left the blinds up. And when I came in on Saturday night, after a full day of sun, the sun just stays there all day. The computers had actually turned themselves off, and it was like a sauna, and I was really, really worried. When I fired up the new Mac Pro, there was some kind of weird error message, has to shut down. So, yeah, that was pretty scary.
Too hot to handle.
Yeah, it was. Seriously, it was like a non-humid sauna. It was appalling. Wow. So yes, aircon. I keep talking about aircon. I've got the perfect space for it up there, but it has to happen.
Well, it's either aircon or a CS80 or something of similar size, I'd imagine.
Oh, that's the problem. Yeah, the CS and all of the other stuff they've always won. In fact, I did a video on the JP8 not long ago.
Yeah, I saw that. Was great.
During that process, I didn't, because it was long, I didn't talk about, things that I wish they put on it. And one was a much bigger heatsink because the heat that thing kicks out. I mean, if you've got that and the 80 on in the same room, it's like being in the Caribbean.
Ah, well, that sounds good. It's actually, that's something to worry about. I mean, the heatsink on a JPL, I can imagine if you stumbled on stage or in the studio, you put your hand on it just as you to reach down underneath, you might end up with a kind of like heatsink shaped brand across your forearm or something. I mean, it could griddle steak, I'm sure.
Yeah, definitely. Jesus. George Foreman grill.
Yes. Well, thank you for joining us, guys. I guess we should move on with some topics because that's the sort of thing that we do sometimes. Now, see if you can spot this. Now, this topic by its very nature is contentious because obviously I don't want to get busted, but it's all about being busted. So see if you can spot this. Okay, ready? That is a bit of... Right, that second sound was absolutely horrible, kind of that sounded like about 8-bit 11K MP3 type thing. But basically, this was the big news actually. While I was away, or just after I got back, I think that the Kraftwerk had been in litigation with another artist who'd sampled this. A little bit of that and put it in this other remix, and they've been kind of after them for a number of years, and there's been through various court rulings, and the most recent ruling, which was at the I think the German High Court, basically said that tough luck, it's artistic license, artistic freedom needs to be upheld to a degree. There was an aspect of that which basically they said that the artistic freedom has to be allowed, and that in itself is a major ruling. I mean, whether or not that actual particular sample was integral to that track, which I don't really... I mean, it feels to me like it was just a little bit of homage. It didn't seem like the whole track was based on it. So there's a complex kind of argument going on there. And it, as with all legal cases, once precedent has been set, then you get kind of case history and people refer back to it. And it can actually have quite a big impact on what might happen in the future. Now, I don't know whether this made much news in the States, Rich, but I mean, it's quite a can of worms, this kind of thing, because sampling was, we were all guilty of it or not, or victims of it at certain times because of when samples came along, loops were taken, and et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I imagine your thoughts are probably fairly straightforward on this in terms of the artist's rights, because I mean, why wouldn't they be?
Indeed. Well, of course, there is absolutely no justification for saying, yeah, sure, they stole it, but so what? Their artistic freedom matters more than the original owner and creator of this particular piece of material that we all agree that they used. It makes absolutely no sense to me whatsoever. The world is upside down at that moment.
It does seem a little bit weird, I must admit, that they went...
It's beyond a little bit weird, Nick. It's downright immoral. It's stupid. It's counterproductive. It's evil. It's absolutely freaking ridiculous. Well, I'm trying to keep my language as simple as possible.
I understand. I think the thing for me that made this kind of weird is I agree with all of that, but because I hadn't heard the sample till recently, and frankly, I struggled to identify it in. Well,
I don't know that. I didn't even listen to it. But I'm just here to say, if there's no dispute about the fact that they used it, and the best legal argument they could make is the artistic rights of the person who has stolen this material supersede the ownership of the person who created it. It's just incredible to me.
Yeah,
I don't have to hear it. If there's no dispute that it's been used, it doesn't matter if I hear it. I mean, now if you get into a whole other discussion about whether or not there exists such a thing as a jury of your peers in a case like this, because very rarely, I would think, is somebody who's actually maximally qualified to be able to distinguish these things, are they seated in any jury that comes to these kinds of decisions about whether or not it was used, let alone fair use, about whether or not it was used or similar or plagiarized or whatever. So that part is always gray area, is the whole, jury of your peers. How many people do you know that hear that? Very, very few.
Well,
very few people understand harmonic progression, and very few people will understand. You have to show people, and then it becomes a whole convincing layer of doing it. And the whole thing is murky, but I'll tell you what's not murky is this decision, at least as I read it.
Do you think that, because certainly in classical world, the whole idea of taking themes and running with them and developing them has been ongoing for a number of times, throughout this kind of romantic period and before, that seems to be an acceptable form of musical development. I mean, I'm playing devil's advocate here slightly. What's different, do you think, though?
If you write a piece called Variations on a Theme by Saint-Saëns,
right,
you've written a piece called Variations on a Theme by Saint-Saëns. If you happen to integrate, a little bit of the melody from Happy Days Are Here Again, in other words, it's different from actually taking a created piece of audio and sticking it into yours and saying it's yours. It's different from that.
Yeah. Okay. No, I think that's...
It's like quoting somebody in a book. I could sit here and rattle off a quote or two from a book here and there, and I don't consider it, egregious breach of fair use policy. I mean, because quotes are fun and musical melodies are fun, and if we all sat here and went, "Happy days are here again," we all know this. You know, like you're not. It's like you're not infringing on the ownership of the thing at that point, because it's
apart from YouTube police would probably close it down and have a call. In fact, we've got a review out at the moment with which has got a drum loop in it.
Somebody's at the door.
Okay. which has got a drum loop in it, which is just naked, and a copyright claim was filed against it. And I went back to the guy who did the review and said, "Where's that from?" And he said, "Well, it's from a free sample pack from Ableton Live." So I wrote this and I said, "Well, I'm going to counterclaim this, because this is just a drum break that is free, available via a commercial producer as a free download, and copyright, and also with license to use. Plus, it was a review, so I'm going to wait and see how that goes. But I don't know. Mark, you're a sample king, or have been in the past.
I was once known as the sampling champion of the universe.
Ah, well, there we are. So, I mean, I totally get what Rich is saying, and I agree with that. But I think that there comes a point where, at what point does it become just like like the Bowie snare or that hi hat from A Bit of a Break that you just wanted to grab because you like the sound of it? I mean, where do you think the line is blurred? Because to me, it sounded like there was a small piece in here, and I thought when I heard the case, I thought that it was going to be, oh right, this is the hook, or it's going to be something else. But in this case, it wasn't.
It's not the hook, is it? But don't you think this court ruling kind of undermines the importance of the groove or beat, because they're sort of saying that it had no influence on the overall song, but it's more of a groove-based, beat-based thing, and they're sort of almost saying, well, then the beat is not as important as the melody or the shape of the song, and I think that's kind of an interesting thing to think about. But maybe this means I can finish the album that I've been making forever, which I think I could never put out. I couldn't even give it away free because I think I'd be infringing so many copyrights. But I love sampling big chunks of things and then writing songs over them and creating a new thing from an old thing. So they're not trying to recreate Kraftwerk. That music has the hip hop track has a totally different feel, a totally different vibe.
Well, if we're getting into groove, it's
emotionally
the Mardi Gras beat, isn't it? From I don't remember what the name of the band is, but yeah, I see what you're saying.
So it's like, I don't know. I mean, if I sample a big chunk of something and just rap over it, then I need to pay I need to pay royalties to the person whose track it is, because I've taken something that belongs to something else, and even if I've used it in a new creation, if it's really obviously there, then and the vibe of it, it's almost like that Pharrell Williams thing where he's been sued for the vibe of the thing. It's the vibe of the thing, the mood of it is perhaps an important thing. But
yeah, that's it. I mean, that's even harder. I don't know, Andy or Dave. Either of you ever worked with the Verve? Because that was a classic case in point, wasn't it? Where they unfinished sympathy, not unfinished sympathy, bittersweet. What was it called? Symphony, which was an absolutely brilliant track. I mean, did use that kind of awesome string riff, but the Stones took 100% publishing of that, and they are credited with as the writers of it. I mean, that's perhaps another story, but in this case, I mean, it is. Is it dangerous? Have we kind of crossed another line, do you think? Devaluing music, or I mean, is modern music more valuable than older music? So it's a very curious I don't really understand the thinking behind that judgment, to be honest.
I don't know. I don't really think it's about that. I think there are two things that I've picked up on from what other people have just said. And I heard this on Six Music the other day. I had him talking about this when the ruling was made, and they're finished with the line of if this was to be forbidden, some other rap artist had said, but that then restricts our creativity. As far as I'm concerned, and the DJ, I think was Mark Radcliffe, is concerned, that sentence in itself is a contradiction in terms, because if you're using somebody else's finished recorded work, you haven't done anything to construct it, you haven't even replayed it on anything, then you're not being creative, and B, you're not being restricted. And as an analogy,
I so disagree with you.
Well,
you're not. If you're sampling somebody else's piece of work, then it's my opinion about this particular thing is it's probably not played back at the same speed. The point is there's a certain sound that people have a Pavlovian response, like an alarm clock response. You hear something and it appeals. If you're familiar with it, it draws you in. And that's what they're stealing, in my opinion. And to say that it's okay to steal that, and then it's okay to borrow that and then run with it, is the equivalent of saying it's okay to go into somebody's driveway and steal their car as long as you don't take their house because I needed to go for a drive somewhere. No, sorry, it's not your car. Therefore, you can't get in and take it somewhere else. It's not your piece of work. If they'd have copied the rhythm, then fair enough. But they're taking. Who knows how long it took Kraftwerk to get that. Who knows how long that is? And let's suppose it's the Blue Monday thing, which they apparently didn't create but stumbled upon. But as soon as any human being, whether they're into music or not, hears that Blue Monday drum loop, they know what it is, and their state of mind is they're immediately pulled from wherever they are into another state of mind. It grabs their attention, and that belongs to New Order, as far as I'm concerned. And unless you've got their opinion and you're paying them money for it, then you can't just take it and use it without paying. That's my opinion.
Or without permission, if that's given. I think maybe. Yeah, okay. I know, Dave. Have you used any samples?
Yeah, nothing that's been released. But again, to evoke that kind of vibe, because, like Andy says, there is that Pavlov. But this is a weird one for me. I am very pro-copyright. I think that artists' work deserves to be protected. In the same way, I think the programmers' work deserves to be protected. There was a key sentence here that resonated a little with me, in that, as the judge said, as long as the new work does not directly compete with the sampled work and does not harm the patent holders, and I assume he's talking about copyright holders. But if I extrapolate this, there's only ever one winner in these scenes. Yeah. And that's the lawyers. And we all talk about that there's no money in music. Amazing. I was at a funeral the other day, and somebody who it's along very much a similar vein of the non-musical chap coming in here and saying, these look all old. And I say, yes. Some of them date back to the 60s. Oh, well, at least they'll do until you can afford some new ones. Well, when somebody at the funeral asked me what I did for a living, I kind of mumbled something about music, and he just looked at me deadpan. Somebody who's not involved in our industry, and went, well, there's no money in that anymore. No, everyone knows that. And I thought at the time, this came out at exactly the same time as the average wage of a Spotify employee, which was $160,000. And I was like, there is money in music still. It's just that musicians aren't getting it. And the real beautiful irony in this is that when you posted these examples, you first of all linked to YouTube for the Kraftwerk one, which that track wasn't uploaded by Kraftwerk, it was uploaded by somebody else who apparently doesn't have permission. There's no advert on the front of it, so he's not monetizing it, and presumably Kraftwerk's publishers have a deal with YouTube. And we all know how YouTube love to pay artists royalties. And then the other one, which has presumably been taken down from YouTube, is on Dailymotion, which is the place to go when you can't find stuff on YouTube. So all the way down the line here, we've just got infringement, and yet there's a panel of lawyers somewhere going, stick the meter on, let's leave this one running and see how much we get out of it.
Yeah.
And that's what I find painfully sad about the industry.
I suppose it's that sort of clash between corporate governance and all of those sort of things and creative output. Is that there's
these guys? Sorry, Nick, but these guys lobby. They lobby. Spotify and YouTube and all of the Google or Alphabet or whatever they want to go under the moniker of now. They lobby parliaments and they lobby governments to slowly erode. And we're little. And the problem with musicians is that they're constantly in need of some kind of affirmation or gratification or acceptance. So they accept and they accept and they accept, and then there comes a point where they're going, actually, we've got not a lot left to accept or give away now. So yes, I feel quite strongly about it.
Well,
and there's always another one, isn't there? There's always someone else that wants to work in the music industry. When my daughter said to me, "Oh, Dad, I want to do music like you," I was like, "Well, if you want to be in the music industry, you need to be a lawyer or an accountant. Go and train to be one of those." And it really, I think you're absolutely right. We just kind of doff our caps at the lawyers and then go, "Hang on, I can't feed my kids," you know. But I just want to go back to something that Andy said. Decoupage. If I decide that I'm going to create an artistic work which is made from cutting up bits of something else, someone else's pictures, and I stick them all over, like, I don't know, a box or I'm thinking about is it Laura Ashley or something, you know,
or a guitar,
or a guitar. Yeah, I've got one in my shop.
I see your point. I think that's fine as long as you're not selling thousands of them to hundreds of different people and not paying any of the original artist any money. That's fine. If you're making it for yourself and you're keeping it and you're sitting on it in your own house, great. But if you're selling tens of thousands of them, then no, I don't think it is all right. I think the original artist should be paid in that example also.
Well, I think in many cases, there are I don't know what the current statute of limitations on copyright is, but it was 70 years, but it went up, didn't it? I'm afraid I'm not a legal expert.
I think it was 50 and it went up to 70.
Okay.
And I totally agree that there is a conversation to be had about the length of copyright, and that's a whole other discussion. I'm completely open to any
but that means that certain melodies fall out of copyright. If I go, is that out of copyright now? That kind of bluesy thing, and then Adele does it, and then is it back in copyright now because she's done it? Does she then take ownership of it, or you know, how does that work? How do you track which melodies are going in and out of copyright? And as they go out, if they're really cool, maybe we can grab them and create something from them, and then put them back in our copyright, etc.
I think lawyers might have a good idea how to do that, but it'll take them a little while to figure out. But
there's a really good analogy between a synth.
Sorry, who's going next?
Dave can go next.
No, go Mark. No.
Oh, I'm just going to rant more because I believe, as a musician, my belief about my capacity to create music is that it has absolutely nothing to do with me at all. So the more open I am to not being egotistical about where that music comes from, the more likely I am to create something unique and new. But by unique and new, I mean that I've listened to music for 53 years. I've gained a library of little motifs that I hear in my head at night sometimes. Thank you, my brother, who sent me this thing the other day, and it's been stuck in my head for about a week and a half. But, you know, those things we've kind of, it's got nothing. I didn't write any of the music I wrote. It came from a sort of a mix-up, mash-up of everything that I've ever heard. It wasn't really me that did it. So it's not an egotistic process. I don't own any of my music, although
your publisher might disagree, but
yeah, they may. But I just sort of, you know, the whole sense of ownership and saying like I wrote this is a really odd thing in itself.
Well, it's the only way that we got at the moment for monetizing, you know, for earning a living out of it, I suppose. Yeah, exactly.
Yes. There was an interesting one with that Verve thing, because I saw Keith Richards interviewed, and somebody asked him about how he felt about it, and he said it's a great tune, and they said, yeah, but what about the legal case? And he went, well, that's nothing to do with me. I have people that deal with that. And again, it just gets back to the lawyers. 9 times out of 10, if you were able to contact the copyright holder directly, there would be some kind of compromise that you would give away a certain amount of points and you would be allowed to use the stuff. I think that is completely fair and reasonable.
I find it hard to believe that didn't happen. I mean, they were signed to EMI. You know, I mean, they were a big band.
They get run by the band. They do. Any remixes or any of those things, any cover versions and everything, all go by the band. They all hear it and go yes or no.
Anyway, let's move on. But before we do, we'll have a little word from our sponsors. This is the new iZotope vocal synth. And that is the former iZotope Fairy. Can you believe it? She's no longer with the company. She's flown on. I think she's now a Tooth Fairy, if I'm correct. We've got a vocoder section. We've got various different ways of processing the vocals. CompuVox gives it a kind of spoken thing. And also TalkBox. So there's also a harmony generator, which you can hear here. As with all of iZotope's products, you can download them. You go to iZotope.com/vocal synth and you can get hold of it yourself. And in fact, 2 weeks ago, because we didn't have a show last week, we ran a competition and we have a winner for the competition. He posted something rather random, I must say. The winner of the competition for last week, we asked them to tweet, I forgot what it is now because I haven't got a list. Oh yes, here we go. It's Ultimate Vocoder and Vocal Synth to at iZotope and at Sonic State on Twitter. So Wednesday was a bore without Sonic Talk, so I imagined Vocal Synth mangling a ditty called Vomit on the Chair, which is really quite random. I hope it gave him some pleasure, or her. DF Dooley, step forward please. You are the winner of this week's, or last show's competition. So at DF Dooley, you are the winner. And we've got another competition for this week, and that is along the same lines. To win a copy of iZotope's Vocal Synth, we want to tweet the hashtag Voice Manipulator, one word, and Vocal Synth to at Sonic State and at iZotope Inc. That's the hashtag Voice Manipulator, one word, and the hashtag Vocal Synth to at Sonic State and iZotope Inc. At iZotope Inc. We thank them very much for their continued sponsorship of the show, and we hope you enjoy their products. If you're a winner, if you enter, or do check the demo out. So that's it. Thank you very much indeed to the show sponsors. Right. Now, let's see where we can go next. It seems like, here we go. How about something light, like file renaming? Now, this SoftTube posted this, and it is quite light. It's not particularly technical, but it actually has kind of a serious aspect to what we do, because obviously, we are generally known for, on the computer, you can just go on and on and on and on. These are the sort of some suggestions about how you might name your files: _final, _final 2, _final 3, true final, final, finished, etc., etc. And I just wondered what people felt about that, because I mean, obviously, with file naming, you can get into terrible messes, and everybody has their own working flow, working method. I suggest it. One of the things that I'm beginning to do now is year, month, day, _name _version, because then if you do order by file name, it goes in order. Or if I quite often use date, last date modified as a way to do it, so the file naming doesn't matter. But I mean, there are important aspects. I mean, it is a bit IT management, but I think actually, if you're outputting a lot of stuff and you have lots of variations, maybe you've got different versions of mixes, TV mixes, all that kind of stuff, then it does get actually quite a big deal. And Rich, I'm going to come to you, because you're no doubt in that situation quite regularly, and obviously I guess you're working in Pro Tools a lot, so there's combinations of actual project files and folders and assets and all that kind of thing. I mean, how do you tackle this? I'm guessing you probably have a fixed method, right?
Absolutely. And it's only changed slightly since since I showed it to Mark almost 15 years ago. When I showed it to him, at the time it was the way it lays out is some representation of the song's title, usually an acronym with the first letter of each word in the title, a version number. At that time, I used to include a date and then some explanation of what's been done in that version.
Okay.
But I omit the date, and it's just representation of the title, version number, explanation, because the date gets saved with the file.
Yeah.
It's redundant to put the date up there. The computer's going to store the file with the date attached to it, so you don't need it there. But it's very important to me that the song title come first, the version number comes second, and if possible, some brief description, guitar or, vocal or whatever, tuning, melodyne, whatever you want to call it. But hopefully each version gives you some reminder of what you've done this time. And it also gives you a nice numerically ordered string of what you call versions without actually calling them versions. The things I never do include Using the word "new" in a saved file ever for any reason, never. No, don't use it. And what was the other one? There was something. What did they have in the example?
Final.
They had in. Yes, final. Don't even bother. I have sessions that we're still working on that were started in 1996. There's no such thing as final. The distance from almost done to done is an infinite space. So don't even assume you're close. Just forget about naming files like that.
Okay.
Use version numbers. And start with 2-digit version numbers because you're going to go past 10.
That's very true. Yeah, or even 3 sometimes.
Yeah, if you're that kind of guy, you can go 3. But I don't think I've ever done over. Maybe I've in
99.
1 or 2 cases saved.
When it gets to 99, you say, "I'm sorry, we can't go any further." That's it, boss.
Anyway. There were my file naming tips right there.
That's a good one. Thank you very much. Andy, I'm guessing when you're doing front of house stuff, are you in charge often of recording sessions through the desk, kind of versions of songs and what have you? I mean, so I'm guessing you might have that sort of issue to deal with as well, right?
Yeah, sometimes. I recently I took over from somebody to finish off Florence and the Machine, and they were recording every single show, and they in fact do it by date. The first prefix was the date. There were no because it's just the date of the show, and the same thing happens with desk files from shows. Date of the show followed by venue name or town name, usually venue name, but it's usually by date if in live stuff because we're always looking back at when something, where something came from or when it was recorded. If you need to suddenly pluck out something, a live version of a gig in Vienna from a European tour, you would, I guess, first look for Vienna, or you would look for that. You would go to that tour. I mean, we keep everything on separate hard drives, so you would go to the hard drive from that tour, look up the date of the show on a calendar, and then just look for that date. As far as personal stuff, in terms of production advancing and stuff like that, I would never use new. I would date stuff, but I'm pretty old school with that kind of thing. And even on the small amount of stuff that I do on Pro Tools at home, I delete stuff. So I have things that the word that I use is latest, which is neither final nor finished. And if I want to know what the last thing, where I'm at, I'd look for something that says latest on it.
Okay.
But as I say, I'm not one for. I'm actually freaked out in the same way that some people are freaked out by the infinity of the universe. I'm freaked out by the fact that what Richard said earlier, nothing's ever finished. I actually can't handle that. And that's probably why I'm happier doing live work, because
it's now,
done.
Yes.
It's now and it's done, and I really can't cope with, maybe we'll come back to this in 3 weeks and just turn up the guitar in the middle 8. No, we won't. Not on my watch, anyway.
Yeah. I can see how that works. So, when the files are recorded as well, so you've got date, venue, bass. Does it work that way as well? Do you get that granular, or are they all folded up and then within the kind of, if you see what I mean?
What, bass as in bass guitar?
Yes.
Bass as in instrument. They'd all be in one folder as instruments, and they'll always be in the same, because you use the same template every time. Everything's in the same place. So if I'm looking for stuff like that, I'm only ever looking for a recording of a show.
Right.
Or a mix thereof.
Okay. Well, that's Dave. I'm sure version control with particularly software builds and patches must be a whole heap of fun in terms of naming. I mean, that is the conventions. Once you've got them, you have to kind of stick with them. Otherwise, if you modify, this is a better idea. Then when you go back 5 years later, it's like, what the hell was I doing? You just don't know. Then you need a naming convention lookup table.
Yeah, we're very strict on that, and as a result, I kind of have a slightly schizophrenic life, in that my work is very organised and as meticulous as possible, and adheres to that there are different ways that we do things for different things. But when I get let loose, It's Untitled 1, Untitled 2, Untitled 3, Untitled right the way up, and sometimes it's a nightmare to find it. But I just have to kind of break out from that, and then at certain points, maybe something will get serious, and then I'll go in and start titling things. But yeah, for me, it's that complete antidote to my working life. I did see a brilliant meme the other day, which was like, what if a musician or an artist was running a marathon and had the finish line, but it said nearly finished. And then a bit further, it was like, not quite finished, but nearly there. And then a little bit further, it was like, so, a 26-mile marathon turns into a 56-mile marathon, because nearly there. And then I think we were joking about it earlier, saying right at the very end, it says, I can't be bothered, I've started something else now.
Yeah, started new marathon.
I know what you're talking about, because Logic, there's a preference, or there used to be a preference in Logic as how the audio files are named. When I used to work with Will and Goldfrapp, I just have these masses of folders full of untitled audio files. It would just be like, I don't know what the hell's going on here. Or they'd all be called track 4, even though they weren't, and then it just goes on. And then when you can't rename them without actually messing up all of the other... it's such a horrible mess. I think that's probably been fixed now in the way that it records audio, but I don't know. Mark, you work in...
No, it hasn't.
It hasn't?
No, it hasn't.
Are you the world's the most highly untitled owning hard drive?
In terms of tracks and audio and things like audio files or samples or stuff like that, yeah, it's probably a mess, but I don't tend to look inside it too much. When I'm working in Ableton, sometimes I rename things. But the way I do it is I've taken Rich's method, and then I name the very top level folder with the name of the song. And then inside that, I'll break that up into 2 different sets of folders, because I use Ableton and Logic, and and sometimes FL Studio, and I jump around between those different things. But I make sure that I've got all of the folders for that project inside the one which is the title of the song. And then I've got different things in there. So I might have I'm just looking at it now. I've got like Logic files which just say guitar or new vocal or whatever, but I don't put the version numbers, but I just go by the date for the version. But then I thought what you were just saying about the word new, whether or not I actually do anything with new. So I did a find on my machine for the word new, and it came up with Camping in the New Forest, BBC News, Pink New Dolphins, which was the name of one of my bands, Duran New Partnership, Material for New Book, and My New Haircut.
Right.
But I'm pleased to say that I don't have any songs called New, so or latest. I don't do that either. I just erase the ones I don't want. That's probably...
It's funny, isn't it, though? But, I mean, when you take this extreme, there's that point where, if you're working on a track and then you have to hand it over to somebody else, either to mix or, a remixer wants to get hold of the parts, and you've just got a load of folders full of untitled, and it's like, oh, man, now I've got to, go in and deal with all of that, and that becomes... Or maybe you create a new version which has everything named properly, and you bounce it all. I mean, it's just... it's like marketing...
I think it's good, though, because it forces them to go and listen to everything that's there, so that before they start making decisions about things. Because when you I find if I'm doing a remix and somebody sends me something and it's all neatly labelled bass and guitar and keyboards and stuff, I think, well, you know what, I don't want to use their bass anyway, so I don't even listen to it. I just go, I don't need that track. Guitar, no, I don't need that. I'm going to play some new guitar. Oh, drums? No, I'm not going to use any of their drums. So actually, I don't know what's there. I start off, I go, the lead vocal's probably important, the backing vocals are probably important. There could be some like cool motif that I've missed because I went, I don't know if I need them, like Moog or whatever. I don't know. So perhaps by not naming things, it forces the person remixing to listen to all your bits. That's
a very honourable excuse, shall we say. Fair enough. I think the natives are getting restless. We haven't talked about synths or anything because, there isn't a whole lot of synth news. Well, of course, actually, the Model D. I should put something in about that because we did talk about it briefly when we had Geert Bevin on the other day. So I'm going to play a quick video, and I'm just curious as to what the panel might think about this because it's this video here. Or is it not? Maybe it isn't. Doesn't seem to be. Oh, there we go. This was obviously news Moogfest the other week. The announcement they're remaking the Model D, Mini Moog Model D. Very swanky it looks too, nice and shiny.
Steady pitched sound.
And this is the sort of promo video. They were making, I think they made 30 of them at the factory that they had there.
From the pitch wheel or automatically through my...
I won't play the whole thing, but it's quite big news, and I guess, with one of the most iconic synthesizers, and perhaps more, obviously more affordable than a System 55 or any of those other things. I mean, this is kind of probably right in the pocket of where a lot of Moog fans will be thinking about it. I mean, Dave, I believe you must have a Mini Moog.
Yeah, of course.
Of course you have. If you didn't...
I wouldn't be able to call myself a synthesist.
Well, that's unfair.
It's a thing of beauty.
I haven't got one either. Does that mean I'm not?
No, exactly.
I've got a Sub 37 here. Does that?
It kind of gets you in the club, but it's it's it had to happen. It just had to happen, and from what I've heard, it sounds there is. I mean, in Bright Sparks, Will Gregory says that there is something very special about the sound of a Mini Moog, and I love the quote he uses in that it jumps out the speakers and growls at you, and it's so true. There are times here where it's been turned off for a while, and I'll be working say on the 8 voice, so I've got 16 oscillators, or say like the Prophet 10. You've got 20 oscillators there that you can use in unison. You can create all sorts of textures with, and some of the sounds I've created, I've called Chris up and gone, wow, that's amazing, isn't it? Like it's 16 or 20 oscillators, and check this out. And he'll go, yeah, it sounds great. And then we'll turn the Mini Moog on, and we'll just use it with one, and we go, the Mini Moog has more power in terms of raw sound than the modulars. And a lot of it's to do with the errors that were designed into it. I love the way that instrument came about in the first place. It wasn't something that Bob was really into right at the beginning. And he went away on a lecture circuit tour, and PCBs were expensive to manufacture, and he left implicit instructions, no manufacturing of PCBs while I'm away. And from what I understand, the team kind of went, unless we do something, the modular's so great, but it's so big and expensive, unless we do something, we're all going to be out of a job. And when he came back and heard it, it was like, okay, I mean, obviously that was a Model A or B or something, but we have to do something with this. So it made total sense for me on a number of levels, some of which are legal, because when the Mini Moog was last around, it was owned by, I think it was Norlin was the company that went under, and as a result, that design and that became orphanware, and there was a guy in Wales, wasn't there, building them at one point. So now the only way that Moog Music Inc., I believe, can reclaim the design, and I think they call it in America the trade dress, and over here it's like passing off, is to manufacture it again, a physical thing. And it just made total sense. The only criticism I would have is that it should be called the Model E. As opposed to the Model D. It needed to be one step on. It sounds amazing, and I absolutely love the idea of this other oscillator, other LFO, sorry, instead of having to give up, VCO3 for your LFO. MIDI, CV, I think it's got S-Trigger on there. Yeah, I mean, all of the, and it's $3,500, and I really want one. I have no room at all. But I have the Mini Moog here, and on top of that is the Sub 37.
Oh, you got a Sub 37?
Yeah, which is a brilliant.
It is a brilliant
keyboard controller. It's not the Mini Moog sound. It really isn't the Mini Moog sound. It has the character of it, but it does not have that raw power that Will so perfectly encapsulated in his statement. But yeah, for me, it's like, It needs to be there. It needs to be there. And it's a great shame, because I believe, wasn't it, the first batch were only available to attendees of Moogfest.
There are more coming, I mean, as far as I understand, but we don't know any.
It makes total sense, and it made total sense for them to remake the You know, the 55 and the 35, to me, it just made absolute sense. I had a meeting with them a million years ago, as you well know, and I won't go into the contents of this meeting, but halfway through I was just like, well, why don't you make the modular? And it just seemed to me to be completely logical. Everyone was asking for it, like everyone wants a Moog polysynth, a proper Moog polysynth.
Yeah.
So yeah, it looks like, you know, Moog have kind of turned a bit into what Korg were doing, you know, that they kind of captured the zeitgeist and they're on a roll.
Yeah. Yeah, well, with the app, I mean, I think the Sub 37 is a fantastic synthesizer. I'm using it for playing live, and I recently bought the Dominion 1, and I really, really like that. But it's nothing at all like the Sub 37, which is designed for performance so much more. And it's so much more effective with that. It's very easy to use. You know, just the whole ergonomics of it. It's a very different thing, and it sounds great. Dominion 1 has got way more synthesis capabilities, but it's harder to operate, I would say. I don't know, Rich. You know, it's a big deal. It really is a big deal. I mean, everybody it's the holy grail of synthesizers. There are a lot of people who are moaning about the fact that why nothing new, why nothing. But I mean, Moog are kind of doing new stuff at the same time, so it doesn't seem like It's not like that's all they do. So I think that would be a bit of an unfair criticism.
It is, especially because, as Dave points out, they added an LFO, which was something everybody always sort of wanted, and that I believe Studio Electronics had added to their rack mount mini Moogs. So they have paid attention to what's come about since then, but you don't build a mini Moog to be something else. You build a mini Moog to be a mini Moog, and people have been asking for this for decades. So I don't understand what's the hubbub. If you don't want one, you don't buy it. And if you do now, there it is. You know, you can have an Oberheim 2-voice, a mini Moog. It's amazing. You know, the OB6 Prophet. You can have the good stuff now again.
Yeah,
it's cool.
Or new stuff if that's what you so desire. I don't know, yeah. Mark, are you tempted? I mean, I'd like to have one just for the ownership vibe and being able to say I've got a motor. I mean, I've never, as I've said repeatedly, it never appealed to me in the past because all my other equipment was so sort of feeble that it just blew it all away. I probably didn't even have an EQ powerful enough to tame it so that it would fit in my mixes, you know. So,
I like the form factor. I'm going the other way. I want to return to like radiophonic workshop kind of vibe. So I've been buying 1960s probably or early 70s transistor radios from the car boot sale and gutting them. I want to make like steampunk synths that do like really horrible things. So I think I'm obsessed with noise at the moment and making lots of noise. So it's probably too musical for me. Maybe
it can do that.
I'm sure I can make noise with it as well, but
I mean that's interesting. I mean that's what I don't know if you found that, Dave, but the Sub 37, you know, it's one of those things you can make a patch on it and it can just go and you're like, oh god, what's happening? You know, that's one thing that is harder to do on the Mini Moog. I mean, I'm sure it's possible, but the Sub can just kind of go crazy and you're like literally going, oh my god, what's going on? And you just turn it down. I don't know why it's making that noise, which is great for a front panel kind of keyboard synth.
It's an amazing controller, actually, as well, for software stuff.
Right, I suppose so.
Kind of one of the reasons we got it, because obviously everything transmits CCs, and I like the fact it's got memories, but it's still not got, you know, it's the errors that made the Mini something. And, you know, at the time, oh God, I could go on all day about it, and Andy will be asleep by the side of me. But it's the instrument that defined everything that came thereafter. It's really fascinating. In fact, it's funny what Mark's saying. I've been spending a ton of time with the AKS here, and I've really learned to love that as an instrument.
People do seem. Now you mentioned that, Andy. I mean, you know, front of house, people must occasionally show up with vintage synthesizers, and you must have a kind of a benchmark of how they might sound on a big system and what you need to do to them to get them in. I mean, because you know, you're in the luxurious position of being able to allow all of it through if you wish, and for the audience to experience the full force of said synth. I mean, have you had any mini experiences that have really kind of shaken the foundations of the building?
Yeah, I think last time I was on the webcast, we were talking about this with I Speak Computer. Is it?
Oh yeah, Tara.
The Tara Bush thing that we did at the Royal Festival Hall, and you asked me a very similar question.
Oh dear, am I that predictable?
No, not at all. But it's my answer is the same. It's massively noticeable, the difference between a modern synthesizer and a software synthesizer and an old Moog. All you synthbuffs will have to forgive my synth ignorance here, but what's the head to him one I always mention?
Oh, the MS-20.
The MS-20. I used to, one of the first bands I ever worked with, Heads, where we were essentially a rock band, used an MS-20, and it sounded amazing. It just sounded amazing, and they sound better than anything else, as do Moog pedals and stuff. They survive in a mix without you having to force them anywhere or hold them down. So yeah, it's always a pleasure. They're always a pleasure to have in a mix because they're cut straight through and they're fatter than anything else. And I think I'd not heard the Will Gregory quote, but that's a very accurate quote. I mean, they just leap out of the speakers like nothing else. They take their own space in it, and you don't really have to do much, to isolate them or to bring them out of a live mix.
Do you find you have to make the band around them sound bigger to compete?
Well, I suppose that depends on how good an engineer you are, doesn't it?
I'll line them up.
Well, yeah, I'll shoot them down. It's all about that. To me, would be all about how loud you have said synths. Because it's not about volume, and I think that's a mistake. Not to go off the synthesizer track here, but I think that's the mistake a lot of engineers make, is they turn things up to make them more audible, and that's not really that's not my way. If something's big and fat, it doesn't need to be loud, because it's big and fat, and it will survive quietly, or it will survive as will a good good bass guitar. A well-made, good bass guitar that's got an even neck on it will survive a mix, whether it's quiet or whether it's loud, because it's there all the time. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that does. I thank you very much. And I suppose that's the magic thing, isn't it, that people want? But I mean, I suppose most people are not necessarily in a position to hear it in its completeness quite so much, because most people who perhaps don't have kind of full range monitor systems and don't have that can't access all of the stuff that it can spit out without really tuning their ears to be able to hear it. I mean, I suppose that's the thing.
Yeah, I mean, they're a real pleasure from that point of view, because they certainly work down lower than most things do. And conversely to that, the thing that I do notice is when you start playing tracks, tracks that people have produced in between live bands, you very quickly find some of them are just obscenely bottom-endy, because people can't hear the sort of things that we can hear. That you're not working with that many sub-speakers, obviously, as you are when you're doing a stadium gig for 20,000 people. There's so much available bottom-end. You start hearing things on tracks that the producers didn't hear, and the final mastering people.
So do you find you have to actually EQ different tracks depending on what
all
tracks?
The time? No, but I mean seriously, all the time. Intro tunes, ABBA Arrival, which we use all the time with the Darkness. I have to take out 600 hertz out of that, and I have to take 3K out of it every time, because when I've flat EQ'd the system and I play that through it's really quite painful at 3K. And the voices, probably to do with the room they recorded them in or the way they recorded them, the voices are very 600 hertzy, so I have to pull that out of the mix, because once you get that loud through a PA, and obviously the intro music for a Darkness show is pretty loud, you have to start tweaking it, and that's when my job begins with most bands, is when the intro music comes on. I have to have my hands on EQ ready to do something.
Oh,
it's funny that whole production rehearsal becomes really vital, and it's interesting that we're talking about bottom end here now with analog synths. In the 90s, I did that Debbie Harry tour, and I used a JD800, which is notoriously hi-fi, everything at the top. I had that piano sound, bright piano. My God, how bright was that? But we'd done everything in a rehearsal room, EQ'd everything, and I don't really remember on Rapture, there's this bell sound that kind of mirrors what Debbie's singing. and we get it out. In production rehearsals, it sounded okay in a small room like Pete Webber's or something like that, and then you get it out into an auditorium, and it just took your head off.
Different.
It's like whoa, and I'm in there like literally like, oh, well, okay, find that part, take it down.
Yeah, I mean, it happens a lot with MDs. It happens a lot when I work with people and you do quite extensive rehearsals, sometimes in quite big places. And the MD will be down. Paloma Faith was a classic example. There were a lot of strings and stuff that were coming off track, and the MD they'd be remixing stems and days and weeks of rehearsals where the poor keyboard player would have to go home every night and rejig a little mix of something. And I'm sitting there the whole time going, why don't we just wait until we're out on the road? Because this is just not, we're not going to be in the same room every night. It's not going to be like this.
No, Mark, you wanted to come in there. Let's, if you could.
Did I?
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I went to see Steve Vai last night, and this was in the O2 Academy in Bristol, and the guitars sounded amazing, and the band sounded amazing, and I was standing at the back by the bar, and my trousers were like flapping from the kick drum and stuff, he was playing to video clips, and every time he threw a video clip up that had either dialogue in it or any speech or voice, it was like hideously sibilant, and it was just like, and I guess whoever put I'm in danger of criticising the sound man now, which I don't want to do because it sounded really good, but and when I do sound, my tendency is to think that if something's mixed, I can put it through the system flat. So perhaps that person had done the same kind of thing.
Right.
But it was pretty painful. Some, stuff on video, dialogue on video. It's just like, wow, there's something really honky kind of in the high end going on there.
Well, I'd imagine it's the same with backing tracks as well. If there's any kind of pre-recorded stuff coming back, as you were saying, Andy, there's this aspect where you end up with kind of like, wow. I know, Rich, you were talking about you play occasionally. You're flying in some samples at some show. I don't remember I don't know if it's every time or whatever that were things that you needed to trigger. I mean, did you? I may have remembered that.
No. There's one song that had a bunch of one-shot synth samples and one spoken word thing that had to be triggered, but there's no actual rhythmic musical notes or even held note. There's no actual music. It's all just triggered events.
Right. Okay. It's probably a slightly different approach then. But I mean, I've done production rehearsal stuff before where we've had to granularize and go back and take things out, and that is quite a challenge.
Well, and we work with artists live who want to work with their tracks, backing tracks, and we have to accommodate that at those times when we do that.
Yeah. I think the thing that's anyway, we've strayed into other territory, which is great because we've been able to hear from you, Andy, as well about more of your specialist area, which I think is fascinating. So I was going to throw in a few more things, but I don't know if there's going to be time here. I don't know if there's anybody who's particularly keen on any of our last topics. I don't know if did you see that the one thing that was that I did find interesting was did you see it was a late comer, the Maggie Rogers, who was playing. I think I might have a little bit of a clip. I might be able to play a bit of this, but great idea. It was where they were in. I wonder if I can play a bit of this without, because I just have an awful feeling that they're just going to get completely busted on this. So let me just see if I've got this.
Next person has
so I might fast forward it. This is at NYU. Let me see.
Quite serious.
Where Pharrell is a resident artist, and now so obviously end of term, and they're playing music that the students have created to Pharrell, and he's giving them kind of production notes, which is a really nice, brilliant idea.
Tell us about yourself as an artist.
And she plays the song, and then there's this really uncomfortable whole period where they're playing.
Good.
Sorry, I've got it somewhere. And they're listening to it together. And and it's great what she did, and his reaction's great, and it's got millions and millions of views. But it got me thinking about this whole idea, how terrifying that bit is. So she's kind of like, keep your head down, this is my tune. She's obviously very strong artistically, and Pharrell thought it was great. But it's that whole moment of when you're playing something to a client or to somebody that you Maybe you didn't realise you were going to care so much about what they thought, and then suddenly you feel really uncomfortable and self-conscious, and then suddenly all of those things about the mix that you thought were okay, you suddenly think, oh, actually, I'm not so sure about this, I'm not so sure about that. I don't know. I'm guessing, Rich, this probably doesn't happen in your world quite so much because, you've got a very long-standing working relationship, but, that feeling, perhaps.
Are you
I don't
kidding
know.
me? This has been happening on a regular basis since I was 5 years old. I'm not quite sure what we're getting at here, but I have been playing for other people's approval since I was extremely young on a variety of instruments in a variety of settings. And I could go through what college juries were like. I could go through what auditioning and not getting gigs is like. I could go through a whole lot of I mean, this is a musician's life. You do this every day of the week.
I suppose, yeah. I mean, I guess it's something for me that I'd forgotten about, but it is part. If I've been sent away to work on something and I come back and play it, and there's somebody else in the room who wasn't there before, it's suddenly like, okay.
There is that aspect to it, and by the way, I've been on both sides of it. I've been the person playing the thing for people, and I've also been the person for whom things were being played. So I've sat on both sides of this fence, and it's the actual core nature of our business that this should happen. And getting to this specific video, her piece was wonderful and his reaction to it was wonderful. And it was really a heartwarming thing to see, especially I think for people who don't often go through that. But I can also talk about movies where the director didn't know what he wanted and every day it was a new dawn. And we would, yesterday's classical score was going to be replaced by tomorrow's jazz score, which was going to be replaced by next week's blues score. I mean, and we were doing every time the guy walked in, it was like, well, who knows what it's going to be today,
Well, that's true. It's a different experience because after a while, I mean, I had this experience in New York when we were working on a mix for somebody at Arista Records, and we were working with Expose, and we would do work on the track, and then every day we had to kind of stop what we're doing, work on a mix, and play it to them, and then they'd tell us what they thought, and they didn't really know what they wanted. So in the end, we just kind of we didn't really take any notice of their input, and I think in the end I met the guy in the lift and just sort of went, I'm going out, there's the session, go crazy, do what you think it should sound like, because I have no idea what you want. But that was probably politically fairly stupid of me.
Some people need to be told what they want.
Yeah.
They want to be told what they want.
Yeah.
Like they just literally don't know. They want you to show them something that
well, that's really interesting. It's almost the reversal, because in the same way that an artist showing something to a producer or in that sort of situation that we just watched is uncomfortable and kind of like quite scary, maybe it's the other way around for the person listening to it, because they don't. I don't know. Maybe I don't know anything, and I really need to be told what is good because I've been able to get away with it for years, but maybe I'll be found out today. That's that creative insecurity. I don't know. Andy, I'm guessing, does that happen in your world so much? I mean, because obviously you might be working on a mix and then somebody walks out front, I suppose, and goes, what? Or that's great, or however.
Interestingly enough, I've just been subjected to this very thing. And to boiling it down to the most applicable example of this, somebody was asking me about it today. I was recently doing something that somebody else had mixed for a long time, and the management were constantly unsure, shall we say. We're not really happy. We just don't really know why. And it's perception. I think. What was happening, basically, to boil it right down, there was one particular thing that they managed to state quite clearly, was that there were two bars in the middle eight of something where I had applied an unreasonable amount of bottom end to a Juno synth part, to which...
How very dare you?
Exactly. But in fact, that was what I was told to do, and I practiced it with the previous engineer, and it was something that he'd done. And when we spoke to them about it, or rather when they came to us with it, they said to me, why did you do that? Why did you do that in the middle eight? And the other engineer who was sitting next to me said, because I told him to, and I've been doing it for a year, and you said you loved it. And which is absolutely true, but because he wasn't there when it happened, they weren't used to me doing anything. So all of a sudden, I think what was important about that example was all of a sudden they're paying attention to things they weren't paying attention to before. They were used to him, they were confident in him, so they never really, I guess, they were just happy that he was there and doing it, and they never thought there would be anything wrong. But because somebody new was coming in, all of a sudden they were looking for things that might be wrong as opposed to looking for things that might be right.
Right, yeah, I see what you're saying.
And it was actually exactly the same because we A-B'd it with going back, using the dating method on the mixes. We went back and A-B'd it coming straight out of the desk. No, we did actually do that. And sent it to them, and they thought they accused us of sending them two of the same mix. So it was actually audio-wise. It's true, Richard. They did. They said, no, you've made a mistake, this is the same mix. And we were like, no. So we filmed it on a phone, but that's another story. We actually labelled the two channels to prove that it wasn't the same mix. But the point there is, what they heard was exactly the same. It was completely identical, but because the environment and their heads were in a different place, they heard something completely different.
I guess that goes back to what I was saying about when you're listening to it back in the presence of somebody else, and you have a slightly different, a different approach to it, I suppose. I
mean, my other example of that, just quickly, would be that listening to a certain band's or a fragment of a certain band's new project. I was asked over to listen to it, and I said, fine, I'll come and do this on the proviso that you do not, A, sit me down in a studio in between a pair of speakers on a stool and play it at me really loud, and B, none of you are in the room when I hear it. What I would like is for you to give me it on a CD, and I will go home and listen it into my living room where I'm not subjected to any psychological external influences or thoughts. Right. And of course, what happened was they did what I asked them not to do.
There's the stool.
And there's the stool, there's the speakers, and they all stood there like that, staring at me, waiting for a reaction. And that's like, it's like performing some other kind of act in front of a load of cameras. It's just not the same.
No,
if you want to have a neutral reaction to something, then you should listen to it on your own. And if you want to play somebody something, you should have the confidence. If you made a decision and you thought it was right and you think your work's good, then I don't think anybody else's presence should really sway you.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. I mean, I'm guessing that particular situation where you've got one of the most successful kind of songwriter producers in the room might give you a little bit pause for thought and change the way that you listen to your own music, I suppose.
Yeah, but not really. Yeah, I see Richard shaking his head. No, why has he got any better opinion than anybody else? I mix a show, 10 people walk past me on the way out and say that was the greatest thing they've ever heard, and 10 people walk past me and say it sounded awful. And that is just human nature.
I suppose so. I know, Mark, I'm guessing, I remember when you came to perform at the Bristol gig, your perception of the way that it was all going together was very different because it was in the moment, and I remember you were terrified, like the rest of us, basically. But you did a grand job.
Having an extreme adrenaline rushes in the kitchen and trying to shake it out by jumping up and down. But yeah, I was, and then when you sent me the video afterwards and said, "What do you think of this? Is this okay to put out?" And I was just like, "Oh my God, that's got to be like one of the worst performances I've done especially of Ordinary World. It's appalling, but it's what I did on the night. And actually, having watched it a couple more times, maybe it's not so bad. But
well, that's interesting.
I'm the world's because worst self-critic.
When you're performing it, you're in the moment. When you're listening to the performance back, it's very different. So I suppose that.
I don't know. When I was performing it, I was thinking I'm not actually doing this very well. But
me too.
And I mean, about my stuff. I mean, but this girl's face, as she's playing that to him, that's like, this is why I've never been high in the charts, because I can feel what she's feeling as she's playing that to him, and it's like the worst feeling in the world. It's so uncomfortable. I remember in the 80s walking into record companies with cassettes and them putting the cassette in, and they play the first four, the A&R guy play the first 4 seconds, and then they go, and then spin forward to the middle of the song, play 10 seconds of the middle, and then skip to the next song and play a few bits, and then they suddenly stop and they go, have you got anything else? And I'd be like, no, this is like, I'm bearing my soul here and bringing you my thing. And you kind of walk out with your tail between your legs. And then, and remixes and stuff, and people going, oh, that bass line's a bit pedestrian on that. But like using terminology which I didn't even know what it meant.
Well,
and,
I can understand. I mean, I remember.
I had this.
Sorry.
With the same demos, I had a moment in the 80s where I walked into this record company and he said, yeah, that's it. Yeah, this is perfect. Yeah. We'd love to put you on our compilation. All you have to do is give us £740 and give us the cassette and we'll master it for you and we'll put it on the compilation. And this was just one of these complete cons, where they're just like their business model is to take £740 from 12 people and to press up 1,000 vinyls and then chuck them in the skip somewhere.
Well, I'll make some sort of. It's interesting though. I mean, with remixing, I always remember it's like, okay, whichever order you play them, you've got three people to please: yourself, the A&R person, and the artist. And if you get 2 out of 3. That's okay. 3 out of 3 is even more awesome, but 2 out of 3 would be fine. Very often it would be 2 out of 3, and you'd be the person who wasn't pleased, or one of the other, or the A&R person or the artist would have reservations or whatever. I mean, but that's just sending it off and waiting for the phone call rather than actually being in the room. I think what got me with that one is that they film the whole thing and there's sort of moving cameras and everything, and it's just they're all looking at the floor, not each other's eyes, just kind of.
Yeah.
And that just really it was the essence of the uncomfortableness of that kind of moment for me. That really,
absolutely. I mean, she looks so uncomfortable. It's just
she looks. She
Towards the end, she perks up, but there's a point in that where she just looks like she wants to kind of disappear into the chair.
She's not sure whether he's. I know, Dave. We should probably finish up fairly soon, but I'm guessing that must happen. I mean, you work with other bands, and they presumably give you stuff to take away, and you go back and go, "Here's what I've done," or whatever. Is that usually in their presence, or is it electronic delivery?
I like it as electronic delivery. No, I don't mind it in the presence. My argument is release a software synth, then come back to me and whinge. Because I've said before, Chris and I mean, I know it's not me and it's a group of people, but when it comes to hitting that button, I'm borderline physically sick, and it's nerves, and some people call it fear. It's not fear, it's excitement, it's all of those things, and sometimes I wish that I could get beyond that after all these years, and other times I'm really glad that
it still happens. Yeah, of course.
Because otherwise you become, the more distant you become from it, the more blasé you become about it.
The less you care.
And I think it's really important. But honestly, and this kind of ties back in with the copyright thing, anyone who's prepared to put themselves out there, create something, is a brave figure in my book. So, be brave.
Yeah. Fair enough. I don't know if you had anything to come back with, Rich, before we go, but that's
Be brave is good. That's a really excellent ending to this segment, because you're going to hear things differently when there's other people in the room, but that doesn't mean it's not good, and that doesn't mean you should let it look like it's not good.
Yeah.
That's true.
And it's taken me 53 years to figure out that every single person you meet on the planet is going to have a different opinion. So stick to the thing that you do and do the thing that you do, and don't change it for anyone. That's the most important.
And I think
be brave with that.
I think that's a good way to end. Just so you know, if you want to check out Maggie Rogers' music, it's maggierogers.bandcamp.com. Rogers with a G, not a D. And I think the track was called Alaska, but it's a great video anyway. That just seeing the process, and he's got some really good points. There's a full 30 minutes of the clinic, and he's actually very constructive and very diplomatic as well. And it was quite an interesting watch, I thought. Anyway, we should probably wrap it up there. I want to say thank you very much to everybody. Don't forget, if you want to enter the competition to win iZotope's vocal synth, tweet the hashtag voice manipulator, one word, and the hashtag vocal synth to @SonicState and @iZotope Inc. That's the hashtag voice manipulator and the hashtag vocal synth to @SonicState and @iZotope Inc. You'll be entered for the competition next week. Just remains to say thank you very much to all my guests. Mark Tinley over there in Glastonbury, thank you very much for joining us. It's been a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thank you.
And I'll have to come and visit your shop at some point, definitely. So I'll plan a road trip. Thank you very much. Also, Mr. Rich Hilton, who's there in Connecticut, thank you also for joining us. I guess you're off to the studio to wax a hottie, as I like to say. A speeding helicopter waiting for you to leap in.
It'll be here any moment.
Any moment. I like to think that you will actually. What's that thing when you go down a rope into the studio kind of backyard and through the door? Rappel into
the studio.
That's rappel, not repel, of course. Thank you very much, Rich. Pleasure having you. And of course, Andy Shillitoe and Dave Spears there in your darkened synth cave. Have you pulled the blinds down?
Well, no, but the sun's obviously gone behind a cloud, so I've been playing with the gain on the webcam settings panel. Anyway, yes. Thank you, Nick. It was good fun.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Andy. Great to have you aboard. Always welcome whenever you've got a hole in your busy schedule. Before you go, have you got anything lined up? Who are you going out with next?
I think I'm covering a band. I'm waiting for a call when I get back from this, actually. A band called Black Cherry Smoke, who are a kind of old school cross between, I'd say, if I was marketing them, I'd say they were a cross between the Black Crowes and Bad Company.
Oh, okay.
American band.
Bit of rock.
Old school, two Les Pauls, Hammond organ.
Oh, yeah. That sounds like fun.
It does sound like
no
fun.
Drums.
No drums, yeah.
Really, no drums?
No drums, no bass.
They've got a cajon player, electric cajon.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Andy. As you can see, andyshillitoe.co.uk. That's with 2 L's.
I should just say there's very little on that website at the moment, but they're under construction, I believe, is the term.
I think so, but it's better than last time when there was nothing. There wasn't even there wasn't even a domain. You are now master of your own domain, which is the main thing.
Indeed,
and
small though it may be.
And of course, Dave Spears there as well. Thank you for joining us from the Synth Cave. G4 Software. Do check out their stuff. I think you had. Did you have some more tapes out recently, or was it some more patches? I can't remember now. I'm not back into the flow.
No, me neither, I have to say. I've had a bit of kind of out time where Chris has been banning it. Thank you, Chris, a million times over. And I've been doing things like spending the odd moment updating. We've got a synth archive section of on the website, so I've kind of been updating that and adding to that. And I think we're starting to make that live today. So
there you go, g4software.com. Do check it out. Right.
Can I recommend something before you close?
Okay.
So in the evening, the wife and I like to settle down and watch crap TV.
Okay.
And we settled down to watch crap TV the other night, and the theme tune for this thing came on, and I was like, whoa, what's this? This is really awesome. My recommendation for the week, I bought, and you know I never buy music, just never. I just don't like anything enough to buy it because I'm a miserable old git, maybe. But I went and bought this guy's album. This chap is called Rag and Bone Man. And he's got an EP called Wolves, and it is just awesome. He's like a young chap from Brighton, but he's like a kind of a really big blues voice. But there's lots of interesting electronic stuff going on underneath, mixed in with that sound. So it's kind of like if you took hip hop and mixed it with blues, this is kind of it's in that vibe. He's like, I'm going to say he's a male. I can't think of the woman's name. It doesn't matter what that.
I'll just stick with the male.
Who's that woman who died? The woman who died, who had the lovely
Joplin?
blues voice. No, they more recently.
Oh gosh,
Etta James.
There have been so
Modern
many.
one.
Don't know. Sorry,
Well, they've all died. So, but anyway, Rag and Bone Man. Go and check out Wolves by Rag and Bone Man. It's awesome.
Thank you very much. Okay, that's it for this week. Just had an email in from a contact of Peter Vogel. Looks like I might be doing an interview with Peter Vogel about the history of the Fairlight. That would be a very interesting piece. Anyway, stay tuned. If you're wondering what's been going on in Sonic State, do check out the channel. Subscribe. We just posted a Meet the Makers interview with Mark Verbos, who is a very interesting fellow. Got a couple more to come on that series. That's it for this time. Thank you very much for watching. See you next time.